It's December 13th, and welcome back to the Squashcast. I'm your host, Rob, joined once again by Jesse Engelbrecht.
How's it, Rob? Yep, looking forward to having a catch-up about the squash in the last few weeks. We're going to look at 3 tournaments. They've been quite a lot back-to-back. We're going to probably start with the one that everyone's talking about, one of the most exciting tournaments of the season so far, just with pure upsets, the Channel VAS Championships. We're then also going to have a quick look at the Women's World Teams, and then finish off the Squashcast with a look back at the Grand Prix in Manchester.
Yeah, so if we start with the Channel VAS Championships, this is hosted just down the road from us in Weybridge at St George's Hill, a club you know quite well, Jess?
Yeah, no, when I was younger, I used to do some training there. I was never based there, but probably was there once or twice a week at times. Absolutely fantastic facility. If you saw some of the photos on Squash site, it's just a real kind of posh lawn tennis club essentially. But the members are really squash smart as well. They really are appreciative of the players there. And yeah, massive credit to Danny Lee, who I know very well. A bit of a mentor of mine when I was younger growing up. He's helped me quite a bit on the court. So he's done absolutely brilliantly to grow the tournament from last year to this year. I think, as we said in a previous Squashcast, the sponsor put all the money in a $100,000 tournament and donated all the additional income to charity, which is fantastic. The Click Sargent charity, which I believe is a child sickness charity. Yeah, so absolutely brilliant tournament to have down the road, and yeah, fantastic to have something this massive, literally in the UK. Pretty much it was a tournament of pure upsets. It was round by round was fantastic to follow this tournament. Looking just very quickly at the qualifiers, you had Nathan Lake taking out Alan Klein. The reason I mentioned that, Nathan is one of the players that plays for us at Surrey Sports Park here, so it was really good to see him take out one of the better seeds in one of the qualifying rounds. Unfortunately, he didn't get to qualify, but fantastic skull for Nathan there. And then looking at the first round of the main draw, I think, again, Rob and I both predicted that we thought 2 Egyptians would be in the finals. We thought the number 1 and 2 seed, Mohamed Al Shabagi 1 seed and Omar Mossad 2 seed, pretty standard tournament, would get to the final. I know we've talked about Daryl recently, and when we saw that draw come out, I think we both spoke to each other and said, actually, would that be the first potential upset? And it was, Daryl Selby taking out the world number 1, Mohamed Al Shabagi, 11-9 in the 5th, an 89-minute epic. And yeah, what a way to kind of set the tone for the tournament. The main draw, like Daryl, who's played at St George's Hill before, he used to represent their PSL team, to come in there and take out the number 1 seed. And you look at the scores, it's just absolutely brilliant. 13-11, 9-11, 9-11, 11-8, 11-9. Huge credit for Daryl, and yeah, one scalp that looked like it really meant a lot to him.
Yeah, it was a fantastic match, and if you look at it, it's a 3-2 in 89 minutes, and nearly every game is to 2 points right at the end. And it really set the tone for the rest of the first round, where we had Steve Coppinger, one of your good friends, beating Omar Mossad, the 2nd seed as well, with only 4 of the 8 seeded players making it through to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, just that's quite rare to see, especially on a tournament that's on Squash TV Live, where 4 of the first 8 seeds get knocked out. For example, Sorav, the Indian lad, beating Borka in the first round. You also had qualifier Paul Cole beating Max Lee, an epic 5-setter, 11-4 in the 5th. Then we also had results such as, like you mentioned, Rob, Steve Coppinger beating Mossad, which was brilliant because Steve had to come through qualifying as well. So it was just, the way it was unfolding was phenomenal. So after that first round, all the predictions, went out the window, but the number 1 and 2 seed went. And then I suppose we're looking at something like, Daryl Selby, James Willstrop, which was on the cards for a long time. Daryl and James both winning their second round matches, progressing through to the semis, but the man of the tournament is, as those of you who watched it, Paul Cole, the Kiwi from New Zealand, just somehow managing to get through qualifying, get through his first match. Looking at his second round match, a 102-minute battle with Miguel Rodriguez in the quarterfinals, thinking, can this guy keep going on? And then somehow getting past Daryl Selby in the semis 3-1, you could call that relatively easy, a 59-minute. Yeah, and then almost the final was the easiest match of the lot for him. It was kind of like an upside-down tournament in a strange way. All those harder matches, he got out the way early and looked like he grew into it, and yeah, won that final pretty convincingly by all accounts.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of tournaments this year where we've seen a lot of the seeds go out first, second round, and and then the tournament settles down. People get used to the court and the environment. But this tournament, it never happened. Quarterfinals, we're looking at sort of Marwan El Shabagi, Mohammed's brother. The third seed for this tournament takes on fellow countryman Tariq Momin, and I would have expected him to win that one, but loses it almost simply for Tariq in 44 minutes.
Yeah, that was quite a strange match. That it kind of never got going. Like there was runs of points from either player, and yeah, you would have probably expected Marwan to kind of take that, seated a little bit higher than Tariq, probably got a bit more confidence going into it. So yeah, quite a strange one, that one. And it was just so hard to predict this tournament. It was absolutely brilliant to see, and definitely by the semi-final stage, when you had Daryl in the top half and James in the bottom half, you thought, right, the elder statesmen are coming to the party again, similar to what we saw in the Manchester Grand Prix with Nick and James in the final there, the older guys kind of battling hard. Time of the year as well, quite interesting how people were thinking about close to Christmas time, and maybe they just started to kind of clock off for a bit, but it obviously opened up and gave opportunity to some of those like Paul Cole just kind of steaming through there. It was really interesting to kind of watch the tournament as well, because there was a lot of talk about how fast the court was, like a really quick fast front wall. Ball was flying off that front wall, but also seemed to kind of take it well into the corners, like the drop shots and the length. If they were being hit well, it was rewarding the players big time. And watching Paul in that final, he was able to kind of play shots that Tariq wasn't even able to get to in the front. And strangely, they didn't look like the best shots at the beginning, but then when it slowed it down and showed them, the ball was staying really short or really deep. So a real interesting court, and you'd probably just say Paul adapted to those conditions better than anyone else.
Yeah, from the perspective, as you said, sort of how you perceive where the ball ends up, that could be down to that camera angle they were using, where it was quite low but quite squat with a wide angle lens, and it actually made you feel like you were really close to the match. If we look at that final, I really feel to myself that the second game was the deciding game. If Tariq has a 10-9, so he has a game ball, if he equalises at that point, it could well just run away with it. But the fact that Paul Cole was able to fight back and win 13-11 really did show his determination and set the final game, which he took 11-4.
Yeah, I think maybe Paul was just breeding off that confidence he'd built up round by round, the amount of time he'd spent on court from the qualifying all the way through, the amount of minutes and hours he'd spent on there. It just looked like when he got that second game, that was it. There was no way coming back. And, I probably slightly disagree. I think even if Tariq had taken that, I reckon Paul would have been quite comfortable in the third and fourth personally. You never know. It could have swung and maybe nerves would have got the better of Paul, and he would have been like, oh, wow, I'm in a final here and it's 1-1. But just go back around looking at the semi-finals, especially with Tariq and James, a real kind of strange match. It's 55-minute 3-love to Tariq. Every game went to 11-9. And yeah, I would have said James would have been, even though he wasn't seated above Tariq, I would have just said his form of late and how he's become a bit more, inspired and back on kind of the horse, so to speak. I thought he would have won all those 3 games 3-love personally. So it was interesting to see Tariq there, and I don't know, maybe Tariq got a bit of an easy route to the final in that sense in the semi, and Tariq had beaten Paul Cole in Qatar, I believe. So yeah, and then but Paul may be able to kind of take massive advantage of Tariq in that sense.
Yeah, and you mentioned that match from the Qatar Classic. That one was 101 minutes, and Tariq coming through that one. But they played in the first round there. Paul again having to come through qualifying, and I think that shows that. You asked me before whether or not I thought this was a fluke, and I was hesitant to answer, but I don't think it is, purely because of his performance in late tournaments. And I really think for a guy outside of the top 30, it's a great boost for the season to come.
Yeah, totally. That he's going to go into Christmas time probably the happiest man on the tour right now, like absolutely buzzing. And it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of bounces back. And yeah, for any of you that saw the photos, like, did you see that trophy? Unbelievable size of trophy. I hope there was a miniature version he could take back on the plane with him to New Zealand, because it was absolutely humongous. But just looking at Paul Cole as a player and what he can do, yeah, definitely a chance for him to break through now. It's going to be interesting to see what he does in the next 2 or 3 tournaments. I think we've got to be measured in what we think in that regard. he's just such a physical beast. There's no doubt about it. He puts in probably more than most people on the tour. He bases his game around the physical side. He's really good to watch playing in the sense that he's so deliberate with everything. Every movement he does is so deliberate. His racket is up is so early on both sides. He's a great kind of coaching model in that sense. So I'm definitely going to kind of pay close attention to him and have a look what he does, and try get some clips and videos to show my players about what he does. But whether this is a tournament that's making people work him out now, people are going to be well aware of him now. So in the next few tournaments, no one's going to take him lightly. Not that they would have, but maybe they thought, okay, he's going to blow up soon. But it'll be interesting to see the next 2 or 3 tournaments, and we'll keep a close eye on him, and we wish him all the best, because he's just got a lot of people talking in the squash world at the moment.
Yeah, and we've seen more recently a lot of those physical players, Rodriguez, Castagnet, those kind of players who have, as you say, almost been sorted out and discovered. But you never know. And he's still going to have to fight through qualifying over the next few tournaments, because his ranking, it's not going to increase that much with this tournament. But really, we both hope for the best for Paul, and look forward to see what he's going to do in the future. So with that one out of the way, we're going to just quickly touch upon the Ladies Team World Championships. And a couple of weeks ago, me and Jesse at Surrey Sportswork were lucky enough to host a couple of the Canadian team players. That was a great experience with our old coach Graham.
Yeah, no, really, really good to see Graham Williams back in the UK and flying the Canadian flag, so to speak. So someone would call him a traitor, but no, he lives over there with his family now, and he's really carved a nice niche for himself with the Canadian ladies national team. And great that he was here for the day, and we got a few good photos up of it. And so no, just good to catch up with him.
Yeah, and such an old friend. I certainly wouldn't call him a traitor, especially if he's listening. So we'll dive straight into the semi-finals, which is where the real action started. And we had a slight upset in the quarterfinals with Hong Kong beating Malaysia, but they faced England in the semi-finals, with England taking it 3-love, a 3-1 win to Laura Mazzaro against Annie Au, and Sarah Jane Perry 3-love against Lee Tzu.
Good pronunciation. So England won that match 2-0 because when they play the first 2 rounds, they don't play the third string if there's a dead rubber. So England number 2 seed, Hong Kong the number 4 seed. That was kind of, I suppose, expected for them to meet each other. And then in the other semi-final, we had Egypt versus France, which I suppose you probably look at Camille Serme for the one to maybe cause an upset or to start a trend for France to maybe get a bit of a foothold. But look, Egypt was just so strong in that regard. Noor Al Shabini actually beat Camille Serme 3-love, so pretty convincing. And the overall fixture was 3-love in Egypt's favour. So, I think the third match was being played at the time. Looking at it here at the results, Nouran Gohar beat Colleen 2-0. So I think they just had a best of 3 friendly. So it was all set up for the number 1 and 2 seeds, Egypt versus England. England are current world ladies champions. They managed to win the tournament a couple of years ago by just pure guts, team spirit, work ethic over the Egyptians a couple of years ago. But the Egyptians looked a little bit more rounded as a team this year. You saw a lot of photos of them hanging out together, doing kind of some team bonding stuff. Whereas before, like countries like Egypt, because there's so many individual great players, sometimes to bring them together in a team situation is not as easy. And I know the England players do thrive off, becoming a close team and a close-knit unit. So that led us quite nicely into the final. Between obviously England and Egypt, and so the lineups were Noor Al Shabini and Laura Massaro as the 1 strings, Nouran Gohar and Alison Waters as the 2 strings, and Raneem Al Walili and Sarah Jane Perry as the 3 strings. Brilliant for Laura to get on the scoreboard for England. She took out Noor Al Shabini 3-1, a 49-minute match, and Laura kind of picking up similar to where she finished at the end of last season in the Super Series finals. Getting England on the front foot. Unfortunately, the other 2 matches didn't quite go the way of the England team, it's just a shame that the England girls didn't even get a game in that sense. I think maybe you sneak a game, you get onto the scoreboard, nerves start to kind of show a little bit. So you had Nouran Gohar beating Alison Waters 3-love, a really tight third game, 12-10. And then you also had Raneem Al-Walili beating Sarah Jane Perry 3-love. Close first game, but then it looked like it got away from Sarah Jane in that regard. So I'd probably say, looking at that, Alice, you don't want to obviously blame anyone, but Alison would probably be the one that could have turned the tide for the England team. I think Sarah Jane Perry is always going to be a little bit as the underdog against Raneem Al-Walili, but fantastic achievement for Egypt. The one seeds getting the World Championships. It looked like it meant a lot to them as well. You could see the joy and happiness for the Egyptian team to claim back that title after not having it for a couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, and you can't help but feel a little bit sorry for Alison Waters and Sarah Jane Perry coming up against such young and highly ranked players. That tournament was available on YouTube to watch as they live streamed it, which is a bit unusual for tournaments. I think it's World Squash TV is the YouTube channel, and it's worth any listeners at home subscribing to that on YouTube, because they've had previous World Team Championships available to watch, and they have old streams. It's quite difficult to find individual matches because they put up the entire day's worth of video, but it's a good resource if you're a bit bored maybe on a Sunday afternoon and you want to watch some squash. Then you can go back on that YouTube channel and find hours and hours of matches that you can sift through. So we'll move on to the last tournament that we're going to talk about this week, which was the British Grand Prix held in Manchester. This was back on the 30th of November, so it's been a couple of weeks since. And I think, as Jesse said, it was a bit more to par. We didn't see as many unbelievable upsets as the Channel VAS. Other than looking at the seedings, we had Greg Gaultier going out in the quarterfinals, semi-finals to James Willstrop. But that's coming back from injury. It's not too much of a surprise.
Yeah, no, quite a standard tournament in results wise, so to speak. Still some brilliant squash on offer, and the odd few kind of results that were a bit unexpected. Again, a bit of a shout out to Nathan Lake coming through qualifying, again beating the number 2 seed in qualifying, and then coming up against Max Lee and putting up a pretty good performance against Max Lee, but just falling short there. One of the matches of the first round, which was one of the best ones, was Chris Simpson versus Nafizwan Adnan from Malaysia, a 96-minute battle with Nafiz Adnan upsetting the seeding slightly, winning 3-2. Chris Simpson was the 7th seed and Adnan wasn't seeded, but I know these two have played loads in the past, and Adnan is known on the tour. He's becoming one of the elder players on the tour now, and he's a real, technically so sound and just got a good all-round game. And that was a real pure game of squash. Both players really battling for the tee, getting their quality length and taking the ball in short. Lovely. I managed to catch quite a bit of that, which was good to see. And then probably the other slight upset of the first round, qualifier Richie Fellows beating fellow countryman Tom Richards 3-1, 50 minutes. Tom has been plagued by injuries, and I believe he was actually injured going into this match. So taking nothing away from Richie, I think looking at it 11-9 in the fourth, Tom was probably still operating on 80 or 90%, but just it's such fine margins at that phase. But good for Richie to kind of get through to the quarterfinals of probably the biggest tournament. I'm not sure if he's got that far in previous tournaments. That's going to help his ranking loads.
Yeah, and Richie has been described by a few of his opponents over the last few months as an absolute beast on court. So it's good to see an Englishman coming up through the ranks like that, taking out one of the older statesmen of the tour. If we look at the semi-finals with Greg Gaultier, James Willstrop, Daryl Selby and Nick Matthew, it almost looks like a tournament from 5 or 6 years ago if we didn't have any of the new younger Egyptian players dominating like we do now. So that was good to see.
Yeah, no, totally. It was a throwback to 10 or almost even 15 years ago. That absolutely brilliant to see those 4 guys all in their 30s. Yeah, easily all in their 30s. I think probably Greg or James are the youngest, maybe 32, 33. But yeah, not many Egyptians entered this tournament, if any. There was very little presence of the Egyptians here, and looking at the Channel VAS as well, only 3 Egyptians in the main draw. So yeah, all 4 actually. I forgot Marwan on there. Yeah, so interesting to see how the Egyptians have decided not to kind of come across and play in these tournaments in England. Maybe they feel, I don't know if it's just a personal choice, if they're choosing to wind down at this time and hit the tournaments hard in the new year. But yeah, looking at the first semi-final, James versus Greg, a brilliant 3-2. Pretty big upset, I would still say. Yeah, even though Greg was coming back from an injury, I would it's just great for someone like James to kind of get that result and actually again stamp his authority on the resurgence he's had. It was an 11-5 in the fifth, a 68-minute match. I didn't get much chance to see that match, but read the reports and read the accounts. It sounded like a very pure game of squash, and one for the ages.
Yeah, and for me that one really did feel like one of the best tournaments of the best matches of the entire tournament, with James coming through 3-2. I think it's good for Greg to have these matches as he's coming back, because when we come to the Tournament of Champions coming up in January, he's going to be looking to come out for that one full guns blazing, and it could have been that you push it too far too quickly. He could have tweaked that injury again, and it could have been a bit of a risk. If we look at the other semi-final, we've got Daryl versus Nick, and as we've said, in recent tournaments, Daryl's been running through some of the players, even beating Mohammed more recently in the Channel VAS, and this one was a 77-minute 3-1 to Nick. These guys must know each other like the back of their hands.
Yeah, I think they get a chance to train together at England squads and national squads quite a few times throughout the year, so they'll be totally aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses. I know Daryl's changed his game quite a lot recently. He's talking about how he's starting to really enjoy experimenting in the front of the court and using more of the racket face and the strings and putting different spins and cuts on the ball. And yeah, he just says, like, he looked at himself and said, right, he's only got like maybe a year, 2 years, possibly 3 years left, and he just wants to go out and enjoy his game loads, and I think he's found a way to enjoy that, really expressive, almost looser than ever, just in his kind of his body language and his movements, nice and relaxed, nice and fluid. And I don't think he personally doesn't like being called the White Rammy, but it's the nickname that's kind of stuck to him at the moment. And he kind of is. He's showing that his racket work and his racket skills are really coming to the fore. Nick, again, not necessarily a resurgence, but he had a slow start to the season, and he's really getting into his stride now. A 77-minute match, so a bit of an epic in time-wise, with only a 3-1. And you might have thought, okay, well, like, that might just take the edge off Nick leading into the final. But look at the final, man, Nick was just animalistic at his best. You could see how much it meant to him. I believe it's been over a year since he's won a tournament, I think, something like that. I can't remember the exact stats on it, but you could see when he won, all the veins popping out the side of his head, all in his arms, and that wolf pose that he's become so famous for now. But leading into that, I think a lot of people were talking about, the Canary Wharf Classic, I think in 2010 when those two played, where James had to stop, I think 9-all in the fifth with cramp in the back left corner. It was just one of those most phenomenal matches, and I think everyone was kind of hoping that it would be one of those. And second game, 12-10 to Nick. It could have kind of gone a bit towards James there, but I think even if James had nicked that second game, I think Nick was just going to be in Paris. He was just in his stride so perfectly, like almost his home court's up in Manchester. He's from Sheffield. He's been on that court so many times. I think he feels so comfortable on that court. He probably knows the majority of the people in the crowd. I don't think he was going to let this one go lightly, and especially when Greg got knocked out in the semis, it's probably just more fire to the fuel for Nick in that regard.
Yeah, great performance. And if we actually look at this scoreline, 11-7, 12-10, 11-4, it's almost an identical scoreline to Paul Cole versus Tarek Momin. And you can really see the similarity in the match where he took the second game and just demolished him in the third. Really good to see.
Yeah, no, credit to Nick for winning that one. So looking forward now a little bit to stuff coming up in the new year, there's that real interesting tournament, the Hutke Fight Night, the $50,000 event, the kind of the one-off boxing promoter style event between Gregory Gultier and Kareem Abdel-Gawad. Completely kind of out there. It's being held in Houston, USA, and we'll definitely be having a little look at that and seeing what's happening there. And yeah, just really innovative ideas from the tournament promoter. He's quite a young bloke, I believe. I read a bit of a report on him. He's got some back-end funding. I think his father owns the Hutke.fit website. I believe it's basically a retail website for squash-specific stuff. Rackets, shoes, clothing. Amanda Sobey sponsored by them. I think Kareem is also sponsored by them as well. So yeah, just a real interesting kind of tournament taking place on the 7th of January. And that's just right before the, arguably everyone's favorite tournament of the year, the Tournament of Champions, which is from the 10th to the 19th of January over in New York. So I'm sure Greg and Kareem will love that as a bit of a warm-up tournament. Just going back quickly to the Fight Night tournament, I believe it's a best of 7 games. So, and there's 2-minute breaks. There's 5-minute breaks in between games, and during each game, I think a player can have a 2-minute break at any point. So the idea is the whole match is extended a lot more. It's real kind of interesting way and an interesting format that the guys proposed. It doesn't sound very pure squash, if I'm honest, but it sounds really kind of intriguing. I'm sure he's going to sell out the house, and for that amount of prize money, man, those two guys are going to be going hammer and tong at it.
Yeah, it's certainly an almost eccentric way to play a squash match. It's almost as if you're down on a Sunday afternoon with your best mate and you've just got 2 or 3 hours to keep playing. So I'm not quite sure how long 7 games will take, but who's your money on?
Oh man, 7 games. I might just have to swing. I don't know. I say swing to guilt here, but listen, my predictions of late. If anyone wants to win a match, just tell me to predict them to win, and the other person will win. Guaranteed. In the VAS, I think I got every single person wrong I predicted. So no, I've got a little bit of a hex over everyone with that. So some might call it a skill and a talent, So feel free to get in contact if you want me to kind of jinx anyone. So I'm going to say Greg. So that probably guarantees Kareem's going to win it. But I don't know. Greg maybe a little bit older. Just thinking of would money make him play better? I don't know. That's kind of what it's kind of looking at. It's almost kind of looking at, right, there's so much money on the line, guys. Who's got the biggest kind of kahuni, so to speak? Who's going to kind of show what they're made of in this event? So no, I think we'll definitely be reporting on this one pretty soon afterwards.
Yeah, and with the TOC being a big fan favourite and one of the player favourites, it's going to be a great start to 2017. In January also we've got the Motor City Open 70k tournament, and that's just the men's. That's in Detroit. Any thoughts on what's coming up over the next few months?
Yeah, no, I think the TOC Motor City is looking good. We'll definitely be reporting on that, and then looking a little bit deeper into February, we've got the Swedish Open, which I know it's a very popular one, 70k event. British Nationals, you kind of looking at the older statesmen again, and maybe a few of the youngsters breaking through, and then quite a big one in towards the end of Feb, the Windy City Open in Chicago. So yeah, no, lots to report on. I think the season's going to start with a bit of a bang. We've got Kareem Gawad really kind of trailblazing his way through. We've got Mohammed Al-Shabagi trying to secure his world number 1 position. I think he's obviously got to watch out. I think because he got knocked out early on in Channel VAS, he's gonna have to pull out some big results soon. And then you've got Paul Cole just off the back of that VAS championship to see how he gets on. So, keep listening, keep reposting and tweeting and liking all of us, and if we don't speak to you again, have a good Christmas and New Year, everyone. Be safe, and yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Absolutely, and as soon as the draw for the TOC is announced, we'll post that up on our Facebook page and probably a link on Twitter as well. But once again, from us at the Squashcast, thank you very much for listening. Have a good Christmas and see you next time.